Hello, and welcome to Books in Action. I'm Jen Latimer, and today I'm really happy to have Emily Witkowski as our guest. She is the teen librarian for Maplewood Memorial Library and also has recently got her, let me get it right, her master's in public health from Johns Hopkins University. So I'm hoping to have an interesting conversation and get her unique perspective on all issues. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Jen. How are you?
I'm good. Emily, I love asking people this. What was your introduction to libraries like as a child?
So my family were big library users. We used to go once a week and get lots of books and go home and read them. And we had books in the house, but it wasn't a matter of buying them. It was a matter of borrowing them. And I always loved going to the school library, and I loved just doing the summer reading program. So the library was always part of my life. And I have an elementary school yearbook that says, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said librarian. So I'm one of those lifelong, have always wanted to do this people.
I love that. And I did not know that about you. So now I know a little bit more about young Emily. Now, were you a free range library user? Like, did your mom take you and then you sort of wandered aimlessly by yourself?
Yeah, there were definitely some sections we always hit up. There was always, so I grew up in Woodbridge, and the Woodbridge Public Library always had the eyewitness books, those like nonfiction books in one section. I loved nonfiction as a kid. That was my predominant reading choice. So I would get all the biographies, all the sort of, that stuff was what I devoured. So there were certain sections we'd frequent, but she would let me do whatever. She let me go up to the adult section if there was something I wanted. So it was pretty free range.
I was going to say, as a teenager, did you wander into the adult section often and choose from there as well?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I encourage the teens to do that now, too.
Yeah, I think it's, and I have a question about this later, but we can talk about this. Like, I always think about the Stephen Kings, right? Who he's writing for an adult audience, but the amount of teenagers that connect with that is just, to me, it's like, if I don't know what to read, or if a student knows what to read Stephen King.
Yeah, well, and there's a whole award that's based off that, adult books that appeal to teens. And I think that that's a really niche audience. And I think that a lot of times kids always want to read older than what they should be reading, right? And that's okay. There's no should. It's what you want to read. Right. So I always tell the teens, if the YA is not appealing to you, go look at the adult stuff. I can recommend, even if it's a short collection of short stories or something, just something to get a sense of what you want to read.
Okay, so you liked nonfiction, biography. Have your tastes changed over the years? Do you still gravitate towards that? I'm curious to like the evolution of your reading as it gets through your life.
Yeah, so like I said, I gravitated towards nonfiction as a young person, and then in college I was an English major. So I read a lot of novels, a lot of fiction, and I love that too. Now I'd say I literally alternate. I read, for every fiction book I read, the next book I read is a nonfiction. I tend to find myself gravitating more towards nonfiction. I love to learn new information, but I think I love that balance of both. And I think that that's something that, again, I like to encourage our kids to do too, and our teens to do, is like, if you're reading something, try reading something totally opposite next and see if that teaches you anything different. And
do you find yourself saying, like, celebrating when they don't like something? Like, I always tell the young kids, like, they get upset. Like, I don't like this book. This is the worst thing. And I'm like, that's great, though. If you know what you don't like, then maybe you'll find what you do like.
Yeah, and that's a hard lesson to learn, though, too. I remember being one of those people that was like, I can't give up on a book, right? I have to read it through even if I'm hating it. And as I've become a librarian, I've realized that's terrible advice. That's a terrible waste of time. And just read what you want to read, and it's okay to give up on something.
Can you read 2 books at the same time, or 3, or 4? I mean, like I'm imagining your to be read pile, your nightstand.
Yeah.
What's your personal, like, what do you find?
My preference is a one book at a time person, but I can and sometimes do read multiple books at a time. And I always have books on my nightstand so that if I am reading something and I'm hating it, or it's just not hitting me right, I'll just put it down and pick up something else and don't have to go over to my bookshelf. You know, I always kind of have piles of books all around my house that I'm sort of picking up and putting down. Yeah.
No, I know that well. As my family will say, like, do you need all these books? Yes, they're my friends. I need them. They comfort me. Perhaps they should go someplace else. And I don't even think I own a lot of books. Like, as a librarian, I think we go to libraries. Like, I'm in a library all the time. I'm at your library all the time. You know, but I still like to have some books.
Yes, and I think that's important to have them in the house. And my brother is a big reader too, and he loves to buy books. He has tons of books in his house. And he always asked me, like, well, how do you know if you want to buy something or borrow it? And I was like, it's just a feeling if I want it in my house, if I think I'm going to read it again, if it's like classic that changed me, I want to buy a copy of it or something, you know? But I think it's good to have both. It's good to be able to borrow and to have things at the ready.
Now, do you do audiobooks as well?
I do sometimes. I'm a big podcast listener, so that tends to be my audio focus, but I do listen to audiobooks sometimes.
Okay. Yeah, I know I find that, you know, it's sometimes like the walk, like the clearing of your head walk. It's a good time for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still prefer the actual physical.
Nothing replaces that.
The paper
the
and
seeing how far you are in the book, all that.
So I interviewed Jay Cooper recently, talking about children's books, and this thought just popped in my head. So when I watch children and the books they pick up, if they are a hesitant reader, I find they choose paperback more often. Do you see that translate to teenagers or an older student who might come to you, or an older client, customer coming to you at the library? Have you ever paid attention to that?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know if I've ever paid attention to that, but I could see how that could be less committal. It's not as heavy. It's sort of not I'll have to pay attention to that.
There's like the folding back of it, almost like it can mold more to your hands. It's lighter weight, which I really think is part of it.
Yeah.
And I, even as an adult reader, I really like some of the paperbacks now, like the slightly oversized paperbacks. They feel good.
Yeah, they've designed them much better now. Yeah.
They artistically are appealing to me, and I always think, but I was curious about teens. Anyway, if we can figure out teenagers, we could probably solve all the world's problems.
I don't think I'll ever figure it out.
No. Nor will I understand 5-year-olds all the time. So I'm curious now, obviously we're in this pandemic mode still. Have you found your personal reading has changed?
Yes. Like I said, I'm a big nonfiction reader, and I have tended to read very heavy nonfiction. And I'm finding now that I need a mental break, right? So actually, I'm currently reading Harry Potter because I've never read Harry Potter before. I'm a terrible youth services librarian, and I've never read it.
No shame, Emily. No shame.
So I'm reading it for the first. I'm just finishing. I think it's book 5.
Okay.
So I'm deep in and close to the end. So it's been a fun way for me to like reset my brain and find the joy in reading again.
Now, the audience doesn't know this, but we have discussed this many times before. Have you figured out so far which character you most closely, and you still have a few books to go, so it's okay.
Yeah.
But is anyone gravitating towards you?
I do, even though it's cliche, I do think I'm Hermione. I'm a rule follower. That is who I am.
She is many of us. I mean, I still know you've finished book 5. You've met Luna.
Yes.
So that is, I always say, I'm really quite fond of the, her sensibility, her quirkiness.
Yeah.
I feel like there are a lot of librarians who potentially could be Lunas. Maybe. But yes, as well as Hermione. So, okay, I'll be very curious to check back in with you to see if any other character grabs you. But it's an interesting question to ask kids.
Oh, I've been asking everyone now since you asked me.
Okay. We started our own whole thing. We have a whole show on Harry Potter and characters we want to be. Are you getting any interesting answers from the children? Or is anything it's something that they, like any quirkiness?
The kids tend to give me the common answers, but my friends who have read it are giving me some interesting answers, which has been fun. Yeah.
Somebody said to me Tonks. I thought that was great. I was like, well, I forgot about Tonks. Of course. That would have been a great choice. So anyway, good. Okay, so that's we're going to put a pin in that, and we're going to come back to that. Now, so we discussed this a lot. You, me, everybody in the library world, how you get teenagers to really engage with literacy. They have to read for school. So there's that act of like having to read, which sometimes then can interfere with their love of reading because again, they're finding themselves and you're telling them what they have to do. But have you noticed any interesting pandemic shifts upon that? Like what teenagers are reading? Are they reading? How are they reading?
Yeah. I think something that I'm hearing a lot from the teens that I talk to is, obviously, especially in this community, we have teens that are very socially conscious and are very active and aware of political things and everything that's going on in the world. And that tends to be what's heavily published in YA too, because they know teens are engaged. On the flip side, because it's all so overwhelming right now, I'm finding that they really want some of that light stuff that was really sort of what was big when I was a teen, you know, the sort of Sarah Dessen, just classic love story, or just something funny. So I'm finding that that's what I'm trying to order and trying to pick for them, is those things that it's just a good story. I mean, Nicola Yoon's a good example. I mean, it's just a fun story. And I think that some of them feel guilt about that. That's like, I don't want to read. And I'm like, if you want to read what you want to read. And it's kind of like what I always tell them too, like, you got to shut the news off sometimes, right? And do something fun for yourself. And if that's going to make you love reading, then let's find the book that makes you love reading, right?
I tell this to a lot of people, but years ago, now I'm going to forget who the author was who wrote the article about what she learned from romance novels. But if you say romance novels, it's often like chick lit, women's literature, which somehow seems less than, which is very offensive to us as readers. But I think of romance as just another choice, right? It's another option. It's not less than, it's just different. And in a world where everything is a little messy, I like a nice tidy story. You know the story arc, right? And if you're very good at writing it, you can take the reader on a journey, right? Maybe it's their life, maybe it has nothing to do with their life, and then it ties up at the end. I don't understand why that has to be bad.
There's nothing wrong with that. And actually a few years ago, the library did for February something called Blind Date with a Book. They wrapped books in brown paper. So I grabbed one and I checked it out and I opened it and it was a Western by John McMurtry. And I was like, I don't know, Western's not really my thing. I was about to return it, and then I was like, you know what, let me just try it. And it's true, it was just a good story. It wrapped up, and it was just pleasant to read. And I think that's what I'm hearing from the teens right now. It's like, I just want something pleasant. And so that's what I try to find them.
I feel like maybe we need to start more book clubs, you know? We need to, something, I don't know what it is, but there's like something that we all need to do just to get, because I think, I do believe, if they think it's going to be too heavy, it's just one more thing. But if we can show them that there's a lightness to literature, right? Like sometimes it's just a nice story. You watch a sitcom, it goes for 30 minutes, you know when the commercial breaks are, you know what's going to happen, you're all good and wrapped up, you know.
And I also think it helps to find the light in the heavy too, right? Like there are plenty of books that deal with heavy topics, like an Angie Thomas book or something, but they're still teenagers, so there's still the fun that they have as teens. So I think that like if I can get them with the light stuff first, then we can start to do that.
Okay. No, I think there's something to that, and I think it's changing a mindset, right? Like letting kids know that it's okay, right? That it's literature. And another thing, I know we maybe we'll talk about this after the break, but we haven't talked about graphic novels. You know, that's another area that I feel like can offer comfort, and is sometimes looked down upon. And I say this to parents. I said, look, I read People magazine. And I read, award-winning novels, right? And that's okay to read both, right? I read short things. I read the newspaper. So it's getting the information different ways, in different forms, and reading poetry. And sometimes that's just needed. So okay, we're gonna go back to that. We're gonna put a pin in the graphic novels because I think that's gonna be an interesting topic. I want to explore it a little bit more. All right, so we're going to take a short break, so thank you very much and stay with us.
It's an onion.
Hello and welcome back to Books in Action. I'm Jen Latimer, and today our guest is Emily Witkowski from the Maplewood Memorial Library. Before our slight break, we started talking about graphic novels, and it's something that, again, for people who don't know, I work in the elementary school in the library, and graphic novels are king, right? They are the ruler. Do you personally like graphic novels?
So I think that they are some of the hardest things to read. So like you were saying before about parents that kind of knock them, I'm like, it takes a really special kind of literacy to read them. And I have read them and I've loved some, but it definitely is not my first choice because I find that it's hard for me to read.
It's
so
work.
I admire the kids that devour them because I'm amazed at how the sort of advanced literacy of it, of having to digest the pictures and the words at the same time.
Have you ever thought about how you read them? Like, I asked Jay Cooper this again because he illustrates them. I said, like, do you read pictures first and then go back? Do you read words first? Or do you read every frame together? And I ask you that same question.
I definitely read words first and then look at the pictures. And then sometimes I'll read the words again, frame by frame. I'm a rereader. I reread a page 5 times before I turn the I'm the slowest reader in the world because of that. But that's how I consume it, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. His answer was like, when he's done the page, he doesn't go back. He doesn't reread. He like kind of just goes through it. When you watch the younger children, they will reread it and reread it and reread it. They'll pick it up. If they see one sitting on the ground, they'll pick it up, go to any page. It's almost like a story. It's like a comfortable movie, right? It's like it's on TV. I'll just watch it to the end. And I find that interesting. Do you find, are there any graphic novels that the kids are gravitating to, like the teenagers?
They love manga. That's something that it's
Yeah.
something that I am not personally super into. So I have to really like force myself to keep up with, to order and everything. So that's a big one. I try to get a lot of graphic biographies because I find that teens do love nonfiction.
Okay.
They want to just learn, and I think that's a great way to do it because it's more fun and easy.
Absolutely.
So those tend to be the two that I find fly.
Yeah, the manga industry is just, I mean, the explosion, and we get a lot of requests, and it's hard because a lot of them are not really written for the younger audience.
Yes. Yeah.
Both topically and just like that's not the main audience.
Yeah.
And so it's a particularly interesting, challenge. But yeah, and that whole, and then my son used to watch the shows.
Yeah.
So he'd read them and then he would watch them, and so yeah.
Yeah. And they all have like 80 books in the series
Yes.
plus, so it's like there's tons of them to
Which
keep
I have to
hold.
say, Buckles has been like a lifesaver when we was
yeah.
reading them, because I would literally put 4 on hold. They would come in, and then I'd be ordering the next 4.
Yeah.
Because then he'd be finishing them, and then
Yeah.
we kept the system very very busy in my house for a while. How do you? So I'm going to switch slightly from graphics and move more to like technology, because often we think about teenagers and their like constant connection to technology, but what do you see about the relationship between technology and reading? Like, is it in fact been a negative to their reading experience? Can it be a positive?
I think it's a distraction, right? So that's the negative part, is that it's a lot easier to pick up your phone and just scroll mindlessly than to, but I do think it can be a positive, because I've reminded them that I'm like, you're reading whether or not you realize you're reading.
Yeah.
If you're reading that ESPN article on your phone, that's reading.
It's reading.
Like, it's still consuming words and learning words. And so I think in some ways it's sort of revolutionized how they think about reading.
Okay.
And it's something that I have to remind them a lot of like, that's still, if you're reading that article, it's still reading. But I do think it's an opportunity in some ways to just take in more information. It's just a matter of balance, and that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Even for myself.
Oh, my phone has to go in the drawer sometimes, so I don't see it.
I'll put it in another room and like, because I'm like, I know I'm going to get distracted.
It's silent and it's in a drawer, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to ignore it. So this is the heart of really what I wanted to go to. During the Maplewood Library renovation, you are doing something super unique, and you are embedded into 2 of the schools in the district. You're at Columbia High School and you're at Maplewood Middle School. And for people who don't know, I just like want to talk a little bit. I want to give you a chance to kind of describe like the impact you're making, or like what are some things you've been able to do, being that the main library, the main location, is under construction.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm super grateful the schools are letting me do this. I mean, not every school district would say yes, and not every school librarian would be cool with the public librarian just jumping in and joining them. So very grateful for that. But I think for me, the impetus was I'm not seeing the teens every day anymore.
Right.
So to stay connected to them, to see them in the school, and to be able to help them with what I used to help them with, which would be finding books to read, but also just being there, being another adult to listen to them. So that's been an amazing opportunity to just stay connected and reconnect with the teens, especially after 2020 and 2021. But I think that what's been interesting is connecting with the teachers in a way that I never had before. So I have now made these partnerships that I've tried to do in the past, but it's just when you're not in the same space as someone, it's really hard. So now when Miss Hicks, who runs MAC, comes and sees me about something, I can help her do something right then and there instead of this back and forth via email or something. So there's been a lot of opportunities to work with teachers in classes that I've never had before. So that I'm super grateful for. And I think hopefully we'll make an impact down the line once Maine does reopen to continue those partnerships.
And get those kids to come follow you back.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And
yeah.
see, well, I think they're going to want to come back when they see
it's going to be, the teen space is the best space in the new building.
Are the kids like when they see you in the hall, are you still getting the reaction like,
yeah, some of
them
like, it's a double take or it's a side eye of like, you don't work here.
I know.
Why are you here? So, and that's been fun too, is seeing, I haven't seen some of these kids in 2 to 3 years. So they're now, they were middle schoolers and now they're in high school, or they were elementary and now they're, it's like totally different kids. Some of them I don't recognize. So I'm amazed when they recognize me.
I also think, I know you work really closely with Keisha at South Orange Library, and I feel like it opens up to even more collaborative work.
Yes.
Because you're seeing her kids as well, right?
Yes.
So you're really able to relay, hopefully, messages back and do some programming. Have you been able to use your Masters of Public Health?
So it's funny you asked that. So my focus was on adolescent health and largely mental health. And Keisha and I just partnered on a program yesterday called The Therapist is In, an open conversation with a mental health expert. And we had 3 social workers come, and it was supposed to be parents and teens separated. We didn't have many teen attendees, but we did have parents. And they could ask whatever they wanted. And I think that that's something that her and we've done in the past and are trying to continue to do. And being in the schools has been super beneficial to just hear what the teens are asking and talking about. And to be here and see what's going on. And to be able to communicate with Keisha in that way too. I know her and I were just saying yesterday that her audience has traditionally been SOMS, South Orange Middle, and I tend to get a little more of Columbia because it's a little closer to Maine. So we get to partner and sort of collaborate and share insights, which has been amazing.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited personally, as like selfishly, for like future programming, and I want to like be able to see, because I just think it's exciting, right? Like really showing kids like how different civic organizations work together as well, right? Like this is how the public can come together. Yeah,
well, right before we closed in 2020, in March 2020, I had a program with the teens. We were having some issues after school, and I sat them down. I was like, we got to talk this out, guys. We got to figure out how we can all relate to each other in this space. And I said, there's no other space in this community where you're forced to be a member of this society that's not like controlled by the school or controlled by your parents. I'm like, this is your space, but that means you have to coexist with everyone else.
Yes.
So how do we do that? How do you learn how to do that as a 15, 16-year-old?
Right.
And also feel respected, right? It's not just you being understanding of everyone else, but everyone being understanding of you too. So it was really, I think, a cool moment, and that was early in my public health degree. So I think that's the kind of stuff that I want to continue to figure out, is how do we create a very civic environment.
Right. No, I think it's empowering. Like even just today we did a lesson. This is not really related to anything, but we did a lesson on freedom of speech and Peter Zenger, and the kids for freedom of the press. And it was like, who is this and what do you mean by press? Like, what are you talking about? And we started breaking it down, and it was like 1700s. And, he was put away for 10 months for printing a newspaper truths, but it was against the government, right? And the governor. And we started talking about it, and then we took them and we showed them the map of the world, like, and where people's rights are and where people can actually just even talk openly. And it was just these little growth moments, like getting kids to think about this, like how to be a part of a community, right? How to understand the power of your voice, and sometimes how lucky we are to have dissent, but it has to be,
Within reason, right?
Within reason, and it has to be like, like we share a space, so we have to be partners.
Yes, yeah, and also for me, I think one of the cool roles that someone like I or Keisha has is that we're an adult that's also not normally prescribed in their environment, right? Like I'm not their teacher, I'm not their parent, I'm not their neighbor. I am just an adult that they have to interact with, and I think that gives me a unique perspective into their lives sometimes, and offers me some opportunities of connection that other adults don't
Oh, I've
have.
also, now that you're in the school, you will see that. The library often ranks very high in their world, and it always says that it's not graded. Like, library class is a place of exploration, but it's not on your transcript.
Yeah.
All I ask is that you come and you be your best self.
Yeah.
Or at least just, work at being your best self,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
we're all, it's like a messy, state. And then they give you their best because they realize it's like the pressure's off.
Yeah. This is for you. I'm here for you. You know?
You're a service.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of the time, and I was thinking about this. We talked a little bit about Stephen King, and I can think about some of my favorite sort of like teen voices. Like, I love Rainbow Rowell. Something about Eleanor and Park spoke to me, and I just think she also connects really well to, like, she writes for women, and it's at many voices, many levels. You think of John Green, he's it has sort of like godlike status sometimes, I feel like. He and his brother, their work that they do for teenagers. Who are other people that someone's listening and they're curious? Like, are there any other, like, we have Angie Thomas, right?
Yeah,
We have these
yeah.
people that are telling these hard stories.
Yeah.
Anybody else? I don't put you on the spot that is like.
It's a tough one. Well, my mind immediately jumped to Evie Savoy, and I know
Okay,
we're very
yep.
lucky that she lives
She
here,
is-
and she just
she is
got
one of
the
us.
Maplewood Literary Award. But I do think one of the first books I read when I became the teen librarian was American Street, and I just
Yes.
think that was so cool to me to read a YA book that had this magical realism part of it, but also was a real teen story. I could see
Yep.
the teens that I was interacting with going through what the character was going through. So she's a big one for me.
Okay.
John Green, like you said, is sort of a big one.
Jason Reynolds was a huge game changer
Yeah.
for, like, I know you just did a thing at Maplewood Middle School with Stamped.
Yeah.
And Dr. Cherry, I believe it
Yeah,
was.
Dr. Cherry Paul, yeah.
But his impact bringing that story.
Yeah.
I always say to kids, like, he's a cool guy.
Yeah.
And he gets you.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of them read that track series
Yeah.
in the middle school and stuff. So that's a big introduction too. I just think there's such a nice variety now that there wasn't when I was growing
Right.
up. And I try to tell them that all the time. Like, I know it's still not perfect, but you have such an amazing variety
Right.
that is really cool, and take advantage
You
of
can
it.
fall down the rabbit hole of dystopian, I feel like, and
Yeah.
come up in maybe a decade. I often say to my fifth graders when they're going to middle school, I say, like, I read like a teenager, right? And that's my happy reading.
Yeah.
Because you can still solve big issues, like, in a story, but it's also not so daunting, right?
Yes.
It's not as dark as
Yeah.
maybe the adult story will be. And that is sort of nice. It's a nice playground to solve things. I really like to give them sort of fantastical reading sometimes,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's not our world. It's that world.
Yeah.
But maybe we're doing the same thing. It's just in a different world. So, well, this has been wonderful. Now we're gonna stop this in a few minutes, and I'm gonna think of all the other things that I did not get to ask you. But it's a good thing my car knows how to go on, like, autopilot over to the Maplewood Library. And I know you're gonna be speaking soon about the summer reading list. So anybody watching, stay tuned, because we're gonna have the summer reading list talk coming up. It's gonna be great, another summer of great reading. So I'm Jen Latimer. Thank you so much for joining us for Books in Action, and my guest, Emily Witkowski. So thank you,
you.
Emily, so much.
Yes, thank you. This
Okay.
is great.
Have a good night.